Awesome. So I'd like to welcome Lauren. She runs content at Scribe, a very fast growing company that we are also happy users of over here at Letterdrop. And Lauren has had this like amazing run in terms of an SEO play at Scribe, a PLG SaaS company over the past, I want to call it like 18 months or so. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to learn a little bit from Lauren on how you can think about applying SEO to your PLG motion as well. So, Lauren, I'll let you introduce yourself first, and then would love to dive in.
Of course. Well, I'm so happy to be here, Parthi. I'm always happy to chat with you, and you're always here to help me with my several inane questions. So thank you. But as Parthi said, I'm Lauren Funaro. I'm head of content at Scribe, where our primary distribution on my end is SEO. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation and hope that I can be helpful.
Amazing. So, Lauren, maybe you can introduce Scribe to us. Like, tell us a little bit more about the sort of like type of business or mechanics of the business. And the purpose of this is for other companies to understand, like, hey, do I look kind of like Scribe? Like, do I have the same components of Scribe to be able to like run this SEO playbook?
Absolutely. So Scribe is PLG, as you mentioned. It's a software for the person that we call the go-to person. It's a step-by-step guide generator and document creator. Essentially, this means instead of recording your screen for a video, what you can do is document your process by simply going through it. And then Scribe uses AI to create a step-by-step guide with text and annotated screenshots. It's an incredible tool, which I do think works to my advantage because it's an awesome solution if someone's looking to build SOPs or any other type of process documentation. The PLG motion actually came out of us realizing that a normal enterprise motion isn't going to work. We really wanted to work with users. We thought that identifying those champions was how the business was going to grow and how we were going to find the right type of customer. And so that's how we happened upon moving forward that way. And in doing that, SEO became a very distinct part of that effort, and understanding that we needed to reach people where they were and we needed to show them what this product is because people had not heard of it before 18 months ago.
And can you give me a couple of examples of what the end users at Scribe kind of look like? So they obviously work at large companies like Netflix and Amazon, but who are these people, and why did you decide, like, hey, like they're going to find us via search essentially, and what are they kind of like searching for?
The beauty of a tool like Scribe is that any industry and function can use it. So really it's more about teams and the creator being that go-to person that I mentioned, essentially the person who's consistently answering questions, training other coworkers, the person who understands the processes and tools regardless of what that department is going to be that creator. And then the rest of the team, the people who are going to be receiving that information and then understanding how to do these processes themselves, are the extension of that. So we essentially find that go-to person first, and then it's really exciting to see when their team gets on board, and then either they're building creators themselves or they are continuing to be on the receiving end of the product and are going to learn from the scribes that they use.
Got it. And in terms of PLG companies, so I think Scribe is unique in the sense that it's very broad, like a lot of people can use it. Um, do you feel like the playbook that you're running could still work for other types of PLG companies where it's like PLG, but just for accountants, or it's a PLG motion just for like a very specific type of person?
Absolutely, because the foundation of what we do is topic related research, right? So, regardless of the keywords that I'm using, even if you're not using my use case based keywords, which are more focused on documentation, focused on creating something, the play itself is still the same. That's the beauty of being a person in content. I constantly am learning from other really talented content creators and managers because we're not competing with one another. We all have something to learn from, and there's a lot of room to do these plays without having to work in the same keyword research and in the same topics.
Amazing. So let's take it to the start. So Scribe decided that you were going to follow a PLG motion. How did the topic of SEO first come up? How did you decide to make an SEO investment in the first place? And what were the competing priorities? So you're making this argument to your CEO. What does that conversation initially look like, and how do you get that initial buy-in to even like start this?
I was very lucky at Scribe that SEO was already part of the conversation when I was onboarded. I will say this, in my experience, I think that the best way that you can make a case for SEO is to look at competitors and other really successful companies using a tool like Ahrefs to see how much traffic they are getting. My argument is you wouldn't be banking on SEO in an incredible company if it wasn't working for you. So if they have heavy traffic, if they're consistently publishing, if they're seeing that growth, it's because there's likely ROI on actual signups or others that would pay for you. The concern there is SEO takes time. And someone internally made a great analogy that I will use now, which is the stocks and bonds of any sort of distribution or sign up play. We look at SEO as something that you can absolutely count on once it starts to run. It will take a lot at the top. And then after you've done that effort, after you've created it, you can start to see those gains, and then it will be consistent. You will never have to pay again. I could actually stop working. I never will. I love my job. But if I did, it would continue to grow for me. And that is the case that you want to make. You want to say, okay, there's going to be significant upfront, but unlike digital or influencer plays, you won't need to continue to put that same effort and money in, and you will continue to get that return. And I think that just showcasing companies that are clearly doing it that way can help make that narrative for C-suite.
Amazing. And I think one of the concerns that some companies might have is a lot of people are looking for like quick results. And I know that is a constant tension between the board, the marketing team, and where the company is at any point in time. And so there are two questions here. One is like, if somebody wants quick results, how should they think about this? And my second related question there is, all this works in time, and in your case, happened relatively quickly, and within like a year, like you were showing like very tangible results and pulling ahead of your competition. How do people think about this when your competition is much larger than you, right? So I might say, like, obviously, like HubSpot owns everything in this space. Does it make sense for me to be competing with a company which has like tens of millions of dollars to spend on SEO versus us? So how do you think about those speed, as well as does it make sense to compete with somebody, even though it's working for them? Like, do we have the resources to do that?
I'll go back into our story a little bit. So volume was absolutely the name of the game when we started. We had nothing out there when I was onboarded at Scribe, and we didn't know what would work for us. We also didn't know if we would be able to compete. We actually weren't sure necessarily who our competitors were, because in many ways we're creating our own category. So we published a significant amount of blogs and other pages so that we could see what would work for us. And I think that volume, making sure that we had a lot out there, was how we were able to compete as quickly as we were. The way that we made volume happen was, one, we onboarded a tool like LetterDrop, and two, we created a process internally that was very much focused on making the best type of content that could go out there and perform without worrying about perfection. We have a very strong optimization play, meaning we're consistently going back and editing the content that is out there. It is very much a living document for us. And in that way, we were able to start identifying what would rank, what would perform, and also what would convert, so we could get those leading indicators of success. This is a page that's not just going to rank number one, it's also going to have a tangible sign up result for us, so C-suite can understand the benefit from this. In doing that, we were able to see growth very quickly. It does, of course, take time. We weren't able to see astounding numbers in those first few months, but because we prioritized volume and velocity, we did have something to take home every month. which starting with traffic, I think is really positive. You look at traffic and you say, these pages are growing, it's ranking, we're starting to see people entering our site. Then you look at your other metrics, such as signups and valuable signups, and you say, okay, this is the kind of page that pulls that. How can we create more of that? And in doing that, we were able to create this consistent growing mechanism. And to your question about the HubSpots, it can be really intimidating. These brilliant companies have so many resources going into their SEO plays, which again is why I argue the value of SEO. If a HubSpot's there, it's because it's working. I think that leaning into topical authority is really the idea here. Some company can have incredible domain rating, incredible traffic, but if you have powerful topical authority, you will continue to outrank that page. And if you really understand your niche, your category, your audience, you can absolutely compete with the HubSpots because they have so much going for them. And if you understand your target, you can work toward that and still absolutely see results.
Absolutely. Just playing into understand like going back to like fundamental marketing, just understanding your customer, understanding like what they really want, what they want to consume, and leaning into it can be your competitive advantage. So let's walk through the different stages at Scribe. So talk to me about day one or the earliest days you can speak to in terms of how did you get started? I have an empty blog or like close to empty blog, or call it whatever you want, blog, resources, guides, pages on our site. What is step one in the PLG SEO playbook?
Step one here was getting content written. So the first thing that we did was keyword research. And actually, we did a lot of learning here because at first we were focused more on types of teams. We were thinking that, say, HR is a team that could really use Scribe. So let's create onboarding content. Let's create an entire content cluster focused on that. And we worked with a team of writers and we built a group of content. Essentially, we had, I want to say, 200 blogs that we just edited and worked on. In that process, we were able to identify the writers that we really wanted to work with. We were able to understand the type of content that would go out there, and also we were able to strengthen our internal operations so that we could have that flow. We then published the 200 or so blogs very quickly because we had spent all that time editing them previously. And then after that content was live, we started publishing at a pretty standard cadence. I would say about 25 or so blogs a month. And I remember very fondly our first marketing offsite. We had the whole team together in San Francisco, and our CEO was in the room with us. And she was looking at our numbers and she goes, "This is great. How can we 4X this?" And I remember Jacob, my boss at the time, and I looked at each other and we're like, okay, well, 4Xing 25 blogs is 100 blogs, isn't it? And so the way that we did that was keyword clustering really helped. Working on hub and spoke model helped us identify those tangential long tail keywords. So we were able to upfront build very powerful briefs related to thematic topics. And then we went to work. We started publishing 100 blogs a month. Originally, the way that we went about this operationally was using disparate tools. So I was managing the writers on Asana, and then we were using Google Docs for our briefs and for our content. And then the CMS that we use is in Webflow, so we were publishing in there. The reason we ended up using Letterdrop was because we needed something that could help us move more quickly, where I could manage operationally our writers all in one place. And it turned out to work perfectly for us because what we needed was having that contained. And then also the SEO elements have helped us move so much more quickly. And I'm happy to dig into that later if that makes sense. But after we got all of that in for, I want to say 4 or 5 months, we were publishing 100 blogs a month. And the way that we were able to go about that was because, like I said, getting away from perfection, making sure it was out there so then we could test and optimize, helped us move at that rapid scale. Since then, we've absolutely slowed down. One, because there are just only so many topics in the world that you can talk about. And two, because we don't need to anymore. We now have a really powerful bank of content that's continuing to work for us. And now we get to focus on testing, experimenting, continuing to publish editorial, but not at all at the velocity we did at the beginning.
Gotcha. So let's walk through that first bit. So you mentioned you got 200 blog posts done, right? So if we're just getting started, um, how do I communicate this in terms of budget to leadership to be like, okay, like we're going to go pay for 200 blog posts with no idea of like what is going to happen here. And then B, once we somehow get approval for that, how do we actually go about executing on that? How do I, like, a lot of people struggle to find writers, a lot of people struggle with process in terms of like how do we write briefs, figuring out like which keywords we should even go, what are the 200 keywords we should be focused on, given that we could literally go after tens of thousands of them. Can you talk to me a little bit about those early days in terms of like getting the baby steps out the door?
Absolutely. It was a little difficult to communicate that. And a lot of what we were able to do was identify in the beginning the importance of SEO. Once you've set that stage, I think that then they understand, okay, this is a play we're going to do. In order for us to do it, in order for us to move quickly, we need content out the door. The more content out the door, the more we'll see results quickly. So the 200 or so blogs came from us being able to make that case and for C-suite believing in that play. So I think that it really comes down to setting that stage very early on and then being very clear. Here's what we're going to do. Here are our milestones. We're planning on publishing this many at this point. And after we've done it, here's when you can expect to see results from us. So being very clear about your projections, being very clear if you're performing against your projections. I think transparency is key here. With identifying writers, there is a mass of brilliant writers out there. I actually think LinkedIn is an incredible way to get connected with them. See who's posting. I have so many writers that I've worked with who I've either met via LinkedIn or in some other way they were connected that way. It's so easy to see what people have. I have 3 recommendations when it comes to selecting writers that I very much recommend. So first being, I would like a writer who has a portfolio of content akin to what I'm looking for. I'm a PLG motion. I'm focused on signups. Do you have experience in that exact area? And do you have any examples or metrics for success in that area? Not just sending me a blog that's ranking number 1, but how did that blog perform? Is there anything you can give me to help me understand that? I would also like a writer that has experience in ghostwriting. You can be a brilliant writer and still not write to the channel. Writing to the channel is the most important thing. Writing for Google is very different than writing for social media, for example. I need that person to have a very versatile voice and to be able to help me create the content that's going to do what I need it to do. And then third, I want this person to have a very long memory for any insights that I give them. So if I've asked them to make certain changes, I want them to be able to adapt to those changes and then to continue to implement them across the board so that that back and forth is reduced. So in identifying those writers, we were able to select that way. And then as far as a budgetary perspective, 200 is a lot, but you can absolutely do it over time. When we were working through this backlog of 200 blogs, this was over months of us receiving this content. You don't need to do it all in bulk. We only published in bulk, if that makes sense.
Was there a reason why you decided to publish in bulk?
Really, we just wanted to get the content out there. We probably could have done the editing and then started publishing it periodically. But once we published in bulk, we were able to start seeing those results more quickly. So it just gave us more to work with. And that helped us understand, okay, this works, this doesn't. So I do recommend having larger quantities of content that you can play around with. I think you also asked something about identifying topics and keyword clusters. I did, like I mentioned earlier, we did run into some things that didn't necessarily work for us. And we figured that out very quickly. We found that use case centric content works really well. I also recommend listicles. And then hub and spoke model, meaning I have this central topic and then I have longer tail keywords working around it, really helped us strengthen our topical authority. And also from an interlinking perspective, it's really powerful. So I think starting with those themes and then going and doing your research for keywords that are relevant to that is a very helpful way to do that keyword research in bulk.
Amazing. And in terms of essentially recruiting these writers, and actually also the projections you mentioned. I would love, and what we can do after is when we turn this into some written content, would love any sorts of publicly shareable examples that you can say like, hey, here's a template for like how you should maybe think about doing projections, or here's a template for like how you should maybe think about doing outreach. And I'll talk to you about that later. But those sound like really great topics that a lot of people do struggle with.
I would love to. I'm happy to help there.
Awesome. And so tell me a little bit more about scaling this operation, right? So you went from the 25 to 100. Tell me a little bit more about how do you turn this into a process. I think a lot of companies, what happens is that they struggle with actually turning this into a process. They think about, you know how it is. It's like we have a piece of content, there are no strict deadlines around it. Like the briefs get written whenever. Everything just kind of happens fairly ad hoc, and so that prevents them from getting that kind of like momentum and velocity. And I know a lot of people are also maybe a little bit scared of being sort of very strict about their process or heavy handed about it and operationalizing it. Could you talk a little bit more about how do you communicate that to your internal team, to writers, and how do you set that discipline to actually get the results that you want and for things not to go astray?
I really credit the company for this because our user acquisition team is very centralized and we are consistently meeting and reporting. And because of that, I'm held accountable to this each month, meaning I need to be producing results. If you're in a situation where that isn't the case, I highly recommend creating some sort of system where you are held accountable to someone other than yourself, whether or not you're reporting outwards in meetings, whether it's just a monthly report that you produce and you circulate via Slack. I think that that's integral to making sure that you're focusing on those results. Setting projections monthly and then setting longer term goals help you have something to work against. And in order for you to work toward that, you do need to be producing something. The operations was we needed to be operationalized in order to publish at that scale. There was no way we could have been consistent if we didn't have very clear delineation between what my responsibilities were, what my team's responsibilities were, and even the writers. Also, using a tool where deadlines can be set within the tool and communication is centralized is very important here so that the writers understand when you expect to receive the content from them. The only deadlines that I don't really focus too heavily on are the actual published deadlines. That's a very loose date, but we look at the month itself. So by the end of this month, I need to have published X amount of content. And with that, I'm able to create those deadlines internally to work toward that goal.
Got it. Cool. And in terms of, you mentioned reporting, right? So you do monthly reporting, you're held accountable to a number. What are the numbers you're actually reporting, and to who are you reporting those numbers to?
Yes, so we meet monthly in what we call the user acquisition monthly meeting with our C-suite. So we actually have the CEO, the CTO in there, and then head of user acquisition. We also meet weekly just as a user acquisition team. So the other marketing user acquisition players I'm meeting with every week, and we're reporting against our goals. So it is a very consistent process of us connecting with each other. That monthly meeting in the report is when we lay out everything that we've done, what the metrics look like. So here were the projections we set. The projections are focused on signups, but not just signups. We're actually really looking at valuable signups. So we have an activated user is a really heavy one for us. Activated in our case is, did this someone use the product? And there are definitely different ways that other teams could have a similar look at this. And this is showing us not only did this person sign up and churn and maybe it wasn't valuable, but actually this is a person that's going to get a lot out of Scribe and it's going to be a consistent user of Scribe. And then we're looking at upgrades. Did this person upgrade to Pro or did they upgrade to Teams Pro? And looking at those set out against the month each time. And it's really exciting because then we're able to see if when we've hit our goals, which a lot of the time we do, and even if we don't, we're then able to see, okay, here's what we need to do to work toward that. What are the gaps? Is it because of a traffic issue? Are we losing that? What are the leading indicators that could play into our success? And then we're able to have those very frank conversations with leadership to help them understand, and then continuing to make the case for SEO. I think that a lot of folks don't understand the value of it. And so we're able to consistently discuss, hey, here's how it's working, and here's how we're contributing to business goals.
Tell me a little bit more about instrumentation to be able to actually talk about the SEO impact on both signups, paid signups, and activated users.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Oh, could you tell me a little bit more about instrumentation? So like how did you how do you at Scribe actually understand if somebody signed up from a piece of blog content, what they whether they essentially became a paid user, whether they became an activated user, and how early should a team be thinking about this, right? Because what happens often is a marketing team will maybe start driving vanity metrics like traffic,
Yes.
but have no way, and especially at a PLG company, it's pretty straightforward. Like they sign up themselves, and you can track it one for one, unlike some sales led companies. And so, what should a team have in place to be able to show the value of this instrumentation wise? And you can talk about your own setup as much as you can.
Absolutely. So we use Mixpanel for our actual signups and activated. We're able to track the event so we can very closely see the path that user took and then the value of that user. I really recommend it. It's an incredible tool, a little difficult at the start, but it helps you understand the full picture. Then we're using Ahrefs as well if we're looking at traffic, but as you mentioned, it can be a vanity metric. We think of traffic as a leading indicator, and we think of traffic in the sense of value. Is the traffic going to the right pages? And if it's going to pages that aren't necessarily going to help us convert, can we then use those pages to increase the traffic to pages that are going to convert so that those pages are consistently ranking number one? After Mixpanel, then we're using Excel so that we can do just kind of the general working against the projections, whether or not we're performing that way. And then our reports are laid out in Notion. So that's where we're able to put all of our thoughts and ideas in a very clear, concise way. And that's where we're presenting when we go into those monthly meetings.
Amazing. And on that note, tell me a little bit more about where you are today in terms of SEO. So, like, once the organization is like, once you have this content back, once things are mature, how do you think about sort of like upkeep and keeping that, retaining that value that you've created over time?
Absolutely. Well, optimization and interlinking are forever. So even pieces of content that we published 2 years ago, we are consistently looking back at it. We do this by tracking rank. So by making sure that that content is still performing, we'll use Ahrefs rank trackers so that we can see how those pages are. We've sectioned them off into tiers. So tier 1 being our most valuable pages, tier 2 being mid, and then tier 3 being lowest value to the company, but still useful content. If we see that those tier 1 pages are dropping, then we will make sure that we're going back and consistently optimizing. We don't do this week over week.
Got it. And how do you think about? I know Scribe also has a programmatic component to SEO. How do you think about programmatic versus content SEO and or editorial SEO, and how should companies think about using both of those? Like, what is each good for?
I think that programmatic is absolutely a powerful player, and I think that it's especially best for landing pages that are very high intent, so that you're capturing that person who's looking exactly for what you have, and then you can create consistent pages that interlink through one another and then are capturing that audience. I think that editorial will always be getting those queries that are, I'm looking for something, I have a question, and then are leading them to that content. And sometimes those pages aren't going to be performing as powerfully as those programmatic pages, just because the programmatic pages are on the nose. They're exactly what that person needs. And that's why I think that they need to work together. I think that you should have two funnels that are interlinking and working to capture every possible audience and create that experience for the user so that they understand what your product has and the value that they can get from it.
Amazing. And then, how do you think about AI? Has AI changed anything in terms of how you approach content?
It definitely hasn't. I had a moment where I thought it would and I wished it would. But what it does is it does give you a nice baseline. I will never recommend you publish an AI piece of content and you think it's going to work. It's just not, especially with updates to Google. Google is looking for the piece of content that's going to provide the most valuable information for that reader. And AI will never produce that. And oftentimes it'll actually lie directly to you. I don't think that it can hurt when you're trying to have something to start with. We use it to help bulk up our templates or our briefs so that we can get this to the writer. But I will never see it replacing writers. I'm very strongly an advocate of using it sparingly or for the things that can be repeatable, like a programmatic page, and then use your writers for that content that you want to perform powerfully.
Amazing. And tell me a little bit more about how you think about optimization for SEO and updating pages as well. And maybe you can also talk about tooling there.
Totally. So, as I mentioned earlier, we do use Ahrefs to track the rank of the content, which is how we're able to consistently monitor its performance. And then for optimization, we use letter drop. So, we're able to use the SEO features in there to make sure that the content has everything that it could possibly have from a really holistic perspective, which is why I love the way you guys use this tool, not just to sing letter drops praises, but really what you guys have done is you've identified something that is very forward thinking. It's very easy for an SEO tool to be focused on keyword stuffing or sort of the older way to look at it. And what you guys provide is much more focused on that helpful content idea of creating something of value. Here are different topics that you could touch on. Here are ways that you could differentiate your content from what's ranking. But it also gives you an idea of what's ranking from a topic perspective, from an H2 perspective, and then you use those two things to then make sure that that piece of content is a more powerful player. So really that is it. We're monitoring the content consistently, making sure that we're doing refreshes when it looks like the content is dropping. And then we're using letter drop to help our writers do all of that to make the page optimized. A lot of the time it'll just be myself and my content editor in there using letter drop because it's so easy to do. And so then we're able to just make those updates. It's awesome.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Awesome, Lauren. So this was amazing. Is there anything on a last note? Is there anything you would say to somebody in your shoes, maybe 18 months ago? So this is a company that is PLG that wants to make an SEO investment. They're not quite sure. Hey, is this going to work out for us? Is this worth it? How do I convince my CEO? I'm scared. Like, do I make the investment and like this fails to materialize in any meaningful way? And am I going to get fired? What would you say to that person essentially to help them think about this strategically and lay out a plan to like very confidently proceed with the playbook that you just outlined?
It is absolutely worth it as long as you're very clear about what you want. What are the milestones that you can set so that you can understand from your perspective and also from the larger business needs? And there may be times when SEO isn't there isn't time for it. It's not now. But even if it's not now, you want to lay the foundation for when. And once you've done that, you can understand, okay, here are the metrics I need to achieve, and here's the effort that I need to make toward it. The other recommendation I would make is connect with people. I said LinkedIn earlier, and I really do think it's so powerful. You can see posts that other professionals have made in the same space that you're in. They're constantly sharing their stories, their experiences, and a lot of the time they're very open to a coffee chat. I have reached out to many a stranger and just been like, hey, can I pick your brain for 30 minutes? And I've never been rejected. I'm also at your disposal. I love talking about this, and I'm very open to meeting with others and sharing my experiences and helping them work through theirs. You're not alone in this is, I guess, the bear down of that response. Continue to learn and continue to try things and to connect with others who can help you do better.
Amazing. That was incredibly motivational, Lauren. And I'm very excited to see your growth as a leader in the content SEO space and for it to be very publicly acknowledged as well. So thank you so much for your time. I'm sure this is going to help a lot of marketers, SEO folks, content folks at PLG SaaS companies. And yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Parthi.